Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Here is your harbor of the soul. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story, Stacy's attic. My friend had this new apartment. It was duplex style, 2 apartments per building, and had a small storage area in the attic. Late one night, Stacy heard a thump upstairs, so she freaked out, and instead of calling 911, she called Hurt, who came over to look around. He opened the attic door and looked around with a flashlight. Said he saw nothing unusual. They figured maybe the neighbor, who had been moving out, was upstairs grabbing something on their side of the duplex. Stacy tried to shrug it off, but remained tormented for a few months. She had trouble sleeping and started having some weird dreams. Occasionally, she'd hear thumping noises from the attic, but Herd had assured her that it was nothing. Stacy became convinced that her house was haunted. She invited some friends over who were into spirit communication, and they tried to contact the ghost to ask it to leave. One night, I called Stacy's house. I had her phone number on speed dial, and I pressed dial, and number to she was my number too. Aim answered the phone, and I asked for her. I thought it was her dad or something. He said, "No, she doesn't live here, sorry." I thought it was a case of crossed wires, or some weird call forwarding error on the part of the phone company. So I called back. This time I punched in her phone number directly, and the man answered again. "No, Stacy doesn't live here. Don't call again." I was freaked out. I really needed to tell her something. I waited a few hours and called back by using my speed dial once again. Stacy answered this time, and I told her that some man had answered her phone. She didn't believe me and asked if I'd been drinking, and then she checked the caller ID. My phone number came up 3 times on her caller ID. I'd indeed called the right number. There was no strange call forwarding error. Someone else had answered her phone. My friend still did not call 911. At this point, it was likely she avoided it, because there was pot in her house and she didn't want the legal trouble. She went about her business, trying to pretend nothing happened. Stacy isn't the smartest person around, and she was still convinced that somehow I was making it up. She didn't believe me that a man had answered the phone, and even taunted me, telling me I was hallucinating. As she left the house the next night, her new neighbor was in the yard. He waved to her and said, "Well, it's nice to meet you finally. I met your dad yesterday." Yesterday? She asked. "Yeah. Older guy, long coat, white hair and a long beard. Seemed a little grumpy. He had a key, so I figured it was your dad." "That's not my dad," she said. "I don't know anyone fitting that description," she replied as she jumped into her car and drove to my place. I'll never forget the look on her face. How long had he been there? The night she heard the thumps for the first time. How much had he heard? How much had he seen? She called the police, but there was no sign of the guy. They did tell her that it appeared someone had recently been in the attic. They found footprints. Apparently he'd been accessing from the neighbor's place through a hole in the wall between their attic spaces. The police said he must have been someone who knew the previous tenant. All the locks were changed, and my friend didn't hear thumps in the attic anymore. The second story, Happy Jack. Hello. I can see that my grin confuses you. Well, let me tell you the story about why I'm so happy. My name's Jack, at least. I call myself Jack. I can't remember what my parents named me. I grew up in some large, grimy city. As a child, I lived with my parents in a squalid apartment full of mold and cockroaches. I spent most of my time outside, in the alley playing with boxes and stray cats. I recall very little about where I lived except for the gap behind my bed. That's where I hid when Mommy and Daddy were screaming and hitting each other. I don't remember it as a pleasant life. But it was okay. Then one day Mommy walked into the kitchen and pulled out a shotgun, shooting Daddy in the face. Then, staring at me, she put the barrel under her chin and pulled the trigger. I ran from the room with blood-stained clothes, fleeing out onto the dirty city streets and running until my legs collapsed beneath me. I crawled into a dark alley and curled up behind a dumpster. The next few days were very horrible. I sat in the box, slowly starving to death as thousands of beautiful people strolled by. It was very painful. Finally, the colors began to blur and the pain started to fade as I slipped below the surface of a dark ocean, the light slowly fading into the greenish water. But before I disappeared into its soothing depths, someone grabbed me and pulled me back to the streets of the city. I saw a wrinkled old face, bright blue eyes, and my mind floated into oblivion. Madame Morkovi was her name. I think she carried me gently back to her trailer and nursed life back into me for 10 years. She fed me and taught me how to live on the streets, how to steal, how to pickpocket, how to intimidate, even how to kill. I became very good as he ran a fortune-telling business during the daytime, and I would hide behind my bed as exotic strangers sat around a smoky table watching Morkovi point her wrinkled fingers at her wrinkled cards. But at night, she would come into my room and lure me out for a night of adventure in the city. I lived for the night holding a bag and a flashlight. I would sneak behind her as we broke into houses and buildings. We would creep back out with our sacks bulging with money and plunder. Sometimes the places we went made me very nervous. But Madame Morkovi told me we would never get caught. She said her gypsy magic opened doors and told her where people hid their valuables. Once, she was wrong one night. In a car garage, a very big man crept up behind us and grabbed Madame Morkovi and began punching her. I found a tire iron and bashed his head in until grey bits flew through the air. That was the first time I ever killed someone. Madame Morkovi said we'd been caught because the man was an evil Satanist who blocked her enchantments. Then, in the middle of winter, Madame Morkovi caught an illness and slowly faded from life. I was the only one by her bed when she died with rattling breaths. She told me to come closer. In a whisper, she told me to make a wish, to wish anything I wanted, and that it would come true. I thought for a moment, and finally answered that I wished to have everything that I ever needed. She placed her hand on my forehead, and with her last breath mumbled the cryptic spell. Her eyes closed. Again I was homeless, wandering the streets, but this time I knew how to survive. For 10 more years I begged and stole to endure. Sometimes I kill. A strange force seemed to protect me. Every time I was starving, a truck carrying food would crash. Every time I was freezing, a building would burn. Every time I was attacked, my knife would find an artery. Madame Morkovi had truly blessed me with a gift. I was content in the knowledge that I would always survive. But not happy. Something still seemed missing. A hole in my heart that was full of sorrow. My epiphany occurred one summer evening as I was walking through an unexplored neighborhood. As I rounded the corner, I saw a red house, and like all of the others, it wasn't really the house itself that astonished me, but what was inside behind a large window. In the warm light of their living room, a handsome man and a gorgeous woman were laughing and kissing. They were so full of joy. The face of the woman brought back memories of my mother from a long time ago. when she used to smile and hold me, I suddenly realized what had been missing from my entire life. A family. I wanted a family. No, I needed a family. Madame Morkovi's dying words came back to me, and with confidence I approached the door of the couple, deciding they would become my new parents. I knocked on the door, then stood smiling, sure that they would open it with welcoming arms, ushering me into the lovely house as their son. But when the beautiful woman opened the door, she gasped and disappeared. The tall man came out of the house and began to yell at me. He drew a gun from his pocket and pointed it in my face. I ran away, and they slammed the door behind me. I cried, confused and alone. Why had Morkovi's charm failed? Why had I been refused the last thing I needed to be happy? I sobbed in a ditch as the sun disappeared behind the red house, but as the moon rose behind me, I remembered another night, long ago, when Madame Morkovi's magic had before been rendered useless. They were devil worshippers. Yes, that explained why they had not hugged me, welcoming me into their house. Madame Morkovi's magic would never work on them. It was sad that the first people I had loved turned out to be evil, but I knew what I had to do. I crouched in the ditch watching the house until late into the night. I saw them walk up the stairs. The woman flossed her teeth in the bathroom. They kissed again, then they went to the bedroom. From my hiding place, I saw the last light in the house blink off. I waited a few hours and then crept forward in the night. I circled the house, rattling the doors and trying to lift the windows. I thought I was locked out, but in the shifting moonlight I saw a tiny basement window stuck open. Dressing Madame Morkovi, I crawled through the window into the dingy cellar. I made my way upstairs into the elegant house, stopping briefly in the kitchen. They had pictures hung along the hallway of the two of them together. I bitterly imagined how much happier they would be if I was in those pictures with them. But it was too late now. They were sleeping, wrapped together in the bed sheets. As I opened the door, I crept past the silver light that flowed through the window and spilled across their heads. The man began to stir quickly. I jumped on him and plunged a steak knife into his eye. With such force I cleaved through his skull. The woman woke and let out a shrill scream. I grabbed a pillow and held the pillow and held it against her face as she struggled to escape. Finally, she relaxed. The Satanists were dead. Madame Morkovi's spell was safe. I had fun that night. I wandered the house, watching the TV, eating out of the fridge, even cleaning the steak knife and putting it back in the kitchen like a normal person. Late into the night I put on their clothes and pretended I was a businessman, rushing through the house late for a meeting, or a housewife, busily tidying the tables and dusting the windows. Finally, I grew tired and walked back up to bed. Settling in between the bodies, I pulled the bloodied covers across my chest, wrapping my arm around the woman. I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I couldn't stop smiling. Putting on my old clothes, I regretfully left the house, walking no, skipping back down the street. I had filled the void in my heart. I was happy. From then on I lived happily in the alleyways, marveling at the wonder of the sun and the earth, staring at the bright colors of the people who strode by my home. Except on the nights I get lonely. Then I wander down a random neighborhood, sneaking up to windows and gazing at the people living inside. I move from house to house until I find a family. I like straightening my shirt. I knock on the door, smiling. Most people slam the door in my face. In that case, I wait until they're all asleep and, well, you know what I do. So, if you ever hear a knock on your door late at night, you should answer it. I'm a really neat guy. I bet we could have some fun together, or maybe you'll catch a glimpse of me in the darkness, staring at you through your window, grinning. I promise I'll wave hello. Can you see me? I can see you. The third story, the well-to-hell newspapers in Finland were the first to report this story as an actual event. From there, it has spread around the world. Engineers working on the Kola Peninsula in Siberia were drilling a well, searching for oil or natural gas. In addition, they found rare geological formations and even gold. Eager to discover what else the well would yield, they kept drilling. After more than a year, the well was about 1,800 miles deep. Then one day, the drill bit suddenly began to rotate wildly. The geologist and engineers felt a blast of searing. It gushed out of the hole and thought. They heard faint sounds emanating from the well. They raised the drill and lowered temperature gauges to measure the heat as the bottom of the hold. It registered over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. We've penetrated to the molten center of the earth, the geologist said. But that doesn't account for the sounds. One of his colleagues answered back, so they lowered highly sensitive microphones down the hold. Up from the well came sounds of agonizing screams. We haven't penetrated the Earth's core, the geologist said. We've entered the gates of hell. Variations. An alternate version set the story at an Alaskan oil rig, where 13 workers were killed when the devil came roaring out of hell. In other states they were digging for oil, smelled sulfur, and heard sounds emanating from the hole crying, "Help us," or "Get us out of here." I'm not much of a writer. Keeping memoirs was never something I used to do, but I will try my best to make this look neat and polished. First, I guess I should introduce myself. My name is William Christopherson, and I am a scuba diver, or rather, I used to be a scuba diver. I worked in underwater research, taking pictures beneath the ocean surface and gathering various specimens of fish for studying. I had been doing this crap for 15 years, while paying alimony for my kids. One day, I got up early for another ordinary dive into the ocean. None of us knew what was going to happen that day. We all thought it'd be just like any other dive. I got on the boat with the rest of my buddies, and we sailed quite a ways out there into the ocean. Then all us divers went into the water, about 200 or so feet deep. Nothing unusual. Just do the job. Come up. Dive in again. Do the job. Come up. And so on and so forth until quitting time. Well, before the second or third dive, we went out a little ways further on the boat, about 30 leagues west of our present location. I and the other guys dove in, thinking it was just another dive. I got separated from the rest of the group while underwater. Normally, that shouldn't happen. One of the rules of scuba diving is to stick together, just out of curiosity. I decided to check out this underwater cave that sat way at the bottom. It was dark, really dark, and deep. I had my flashlight with me, so it wasn't too bad. But even then, the darkness was something else. Surreal in a way. It was as if you could feel it. That's how friggin' dark it was. I hadn't been in that cave 10 minutes when suddenly I heard horrific screaming coming from up ahead. I honestly can't describe the terrifying sounds I heard, except that they were human voices, screaming at the top of their lungs, as if they were in lots of pain. At the same time, the water had gotten warmer. Not by much, but enough to detect a difference in the temperature. But those screams made my flesh shiver with absolute horror. I don't remember ever having been that scared before. I swear to God, there were hundreds, maybe millions of screams coming from that cave, men and women, and maybe some children. I was so freaked out at those shrieking voices, I couldn't stand it. I rushed to get out of the cave, swimming as fast as I could, not looking back. I was breathing heavily, something that isn't safe to do while underwater scuba diving. I got up onto the boat safely, shaking like a leaf. My buddies and the other guys aboard couldn't understand what was wrong with me, and I didn't tell them what had happened. Until a few days later, no one believed me. They all thought I was freaking crazy. I don't know what those screams were, but I knew they were there. I heard them with my own ears. A few people I've told this story to say that I heard the screams from hell itself. At first, I thought them insane, but now I'm beginning to believe them. My friends think I'm insane. They don't believe one word of my experience. I quit my scuba diving job and took up employment at a hardware store somewhere in town. I've sworn to myself I will never dive or go in the water again. I have never forgotten those screams, and I never will. They haunt me in my dreams every night, but I don't tell anyone about them. I don't need any more of their "you're crazy" crap. My life has changed since that horrible encounter in the cave. I've become more realistic about the reality of hell. As an atheist, I don't believe in God. But as a scuba dive, or having heard those screams from nowhere in an underwater cave, screams that have left a permanent mark on my life, I must say I do believe in a hell, according to many religious doctrines, as well as the well-to-hell hoax. Hell is located at the center of the earth. I firmly believe that to be true today. I have listened to the alleged screams from hell audio clip, and I can honestly say, as a phony, the real screams sound nothing like that. The real ones are worse, much worse, more horrifying than you could ever imagine. That audio recording is like Brahms' lullaby trying to pass off for heavy death metal. It's definitely not the same shrieking voices I heard in the cave. The real screaming is indescribable. You just can't imagine it. It's taken a lot of guts for me to finally write up this part of my life. After having been criticized and called a lunatic by so many people, hell is real, and I wish it weren't. I don't know if there's any chance of escaping it, but I know it's there, at the center of the earth. I heard the screams. I know it's true. No one can tell me otherwise. I know it's for real. Thanks for reading my story.